Hello everyone, bringing you a video today which forms the Mannequin of the Month video for September 2019. And what we're having a look at today is this mannequin here, set up to represent a corporal, a British infantry corporal in Burma in 1945. The reason for having it set up this way, or one of the reasons for having it set up this way is, of course, later in the month, Victory Show is on in the UK at Cosby, and we traditionally have always put on a Far East display there, be it Chindit or 14th Army. This year we're putting on a Chindit display again. And alongside that, I thought it'd be nice to do a Mannequin of the Month, which similar theatre but regular infantry as part of 14th Army as opposed to the Chindits specifically. So we'll work through what's on the mannequin here as usual, working top to bottom at the front, and then we'll move it around and have a look at the equipment on the sides and the back. You'll see much of the equipment is actually very standard across British infantry. There's very little here other than the uniform, which really denotes tropical or far jungle service. Starting at the top, we have the Mark II helmet, very commonly worn in the Far East alongside the slouch hat. And you can see here this has an Indian-made helmet net on. As I say, very common to see these. They're actually quite good, particularly in monsoon season. They're quite good keeping the rain off, obviously. If you're wearing a monsoon cape, the rain runs off your helmet and then runs onto the cape. That's the idea anyway. Underneath this we have, or worn as the main body of the uniform, we have the bush jacket here. This is of a pattern introduced with the, well, alongside or just after the other jungle green uniform items, the battle dress blouse and the jungle green trousers. A very practical garment, sometimes worn untucked, sometimes worn tucked in. Very popular, and it's so popular in fact it would see use right through into the 1950s in Malaya. Very, very popular garment, made of Airtex fabric, almost like football shirt material, so very breathable. And again, it has coconut shell buttons, as much Indian-made clothing does. This is, of course, an Indian-made bush jacket. The web equipment, likewise, is Indian-made, made to 1937 pattern. Basically, it is made to standard 1937 pattern. However, it does have the eccentricities of Indian manufacture. It's very rough and ready, and some of the components don't fit together all that well, but it does do the job, and didn't have a long service expectancy in the jungle. It was not expected to last very long. It's not rot-proofed in any way, and so components would fall apart and need to be replaced. So if you can churn out lots of it very cheaply, that's one option compared to making a more durable web equipment. So that's certainly a feature of Indian webbing, is it's churned out in vast quantities but not the best quality. So we have the basic pouches at the front here, and these, similar to practice in Europe, would carry Bren gun magazine and Bren gun magazines and rifle ammunition for the soldier's rifle, or obviously in this case as a corporal it may well be for a submachine gun. Standard 1937 pattern belt there, again Indian made, and you can see the L straps coming down for the haversack on the back there. We'll move this round now and have a look at the other components that are on the web equipment here. Moving the mannequin round to have a look at the left side here, we can see the corporal's stripes on the arm there, corporal chevrons. If any other insignia were worn, it tended to be with press studs to allow it to be removed for laundering, but these have been sewn directly onto the uniform. There's no other insignia on this denoting what unit this man is part of or anything like that. So this is very generic from that point of view, and that's certainly something that was very common in the Far East, to wear very little insignia. But we do have rank on the arm there. Here you can see a close-up of the corporal stripes or corporal chevrons, and as you can see they are just strips of white cloth sewn directly onto the uniform. Moving down, we can see that, as already said, being a corporal, this man would carry would commonly carry a submachine gun or machine carbine in British terminology of the time, which by this point would most likely be a Sten of one mark or another, most likely a Mark III Sten. Very commonly seen in photographs at the time. On the hip, in place of a bayonet, which of course would not be carrying a bayonet, we have the machete. Now, if you were carrying a bayonet, if you were a rifleman, you would perhaps have your machete on the other side, on the right hip, as you would have to have your bayonet on the left hip. But with no bayonet there, you can instead carry the machete on the hip there. This, of course, being a British-made machete. Indian-made Dar pattern machetes were very common as well. Just a variation on the theme, really, and it really just depended on what you were issued. But this being a British-made example, I will just withdraw this from the sheath here so you can see a little bit more detail of the blade pattern there, as you can see. And this is something I'll do a more detailed video on at some point in the future. But that is a British-made machete, the design of which basically dates back to the First World War and beyond. So it's a very long-lived design, and these were still being issued in the 1960s. So that's what we have on the left side of the mannequin here, the left side of the equipment set. On the back here you can see the 1937 pattern haversack, and the contents of this were very, very little from those carried in other theatres of war. Obviously there's no ground sheet here and there's no anti-gas cape. They were quite commonly left behind. You might sometimes find a monsoon cape or something rolled up and attached to the back of the belt, but this is very light order here, so fighting order essentially. And you have, as I say, in here your hold all with your sanitary items, your soap, razor and so forth, towel. You might also have an Indian made or British made cardigan, because certainly in the Highland areas and at night it can actually get quite cool, so that extra layer would be appreciated. And also cap comforter as well. Cap comforters are commonly seen worn out in the Far East, commonly enough, and that would be carried in here as well, of course. So basically the standard sort of haversack contents, mess tins as well, although again in the Far East sometimes you see them carried in an extra water bottle carrier. But that's really, if you're going to do something like that, check out period photographs. I've tried to make this one as generic as possible, based on photographs myself. So as I say, basically the standard sort of content in the haversack there, and again Indian made 1937 pattern. Originally the blanco, this would all have been blancoed, but blanco washes out very, very fast in the humid conditions of the Far East, so it very quickly fades to something almost near bare webbing colour, which is why it's so pale. So that's the haversack there on the back. Moving around to look at the right side of the mannequin, again here we can see the corporal chevrons, corporal stripes on the arm there, stitched directly onto the uniform. And down here in the water bottle carrier, Indian made water bottle carrier, we have an Indian made water bottle. Again, not in a felt cover or anything, just painted green. And this again, it's just an Indian take on the standard British water bottle, the same capacity and so forth, as you can see in an Indian made carrier, which differs from other manufacturers in having a buckle at the top rather than a press stud, but otherwise the standard skeleton type of water bottle carrier. So there we are, that's how I have the mannequin set up for September. As I say, some of this kit will probably come off the mannequin and come with me to Victory Show. But as I say, I just thought it would be nice to do a setup like this. We hadn't had a Far East, I don't believe we've had a Far East mannequin so far. I've done some videos on the Indian webbing and the uniform and so forth, but other than the brief look we took at Preston as part of the Armed Forces Day display there, we hadn't had a look, so I thought it'd be nice to do something like this. Obviously VJ Day has just been and gone in August, the anniversary thereof, but for next year, obviously, for the big anniversary, the 75th, we'll have to do something for that, definitely. But as I say, British Corporal in the late war era, 1945, out in the Far East. So there it is. I hope you found that interesting, as I always say. If you have and you'd like to see more videos like this talking about British and Commonwealth militaria, then please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you're new to subscribing or you've already subscribed, do make sure you've clicked the little bell, little notification button down below. We'll notify you when I upload future videos. Alongside that, there's a Facebook and an Instagram page where I'll be putting more detailed photographs of this mannequin if you'd like to take a look at those. And yeah, that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So until next time, bye for now.